Hello. Welcome, everyone. Nice to be here with you. My name is Amanda, and your other facilitator here tonight is Tosca.
Hello, everybody.
And just before we start, you heard the recording is in progress. So just so you know that this is being recorded for some people that weren't able to be here live tonight. And so it will go out. Your faces will not be on it, but it will go out. So that's why we're recording this. So we're going to go through, we've got a PowerPoint here just to kind of talk about food addiction in general, and then what we do at Shift. And then we'll open it up to any questions you have. And as we're going through, if there's things you want to ask me or interrupt us, please do. This goes well if people jump in when you want to. And I can't always see people when I'm doing the PowerPoint, so please don't hesitate to just unmute yourself and jump on in when you hear, okay, great, all these people are coming in. So if everyone could just, if you could keep yourself muted while you're on here, that would be great. And again, just unmute yourself and pop in if you have a question, or you can put it in the chat. Okay. So again, for people that have just joined now, my name is Amanda, and I'm with Shift Recovery, and Tosca there as well. Give a little wave, Tosca. Tosca is also with Shift Recovery. And so Shift has been treating food addiction for many years. And we're definitely going to talk about that. And Shift stands for Sobriety, Hope, Freedom, and Transformation. That's what we've seen much of in the last 30 plus years. And we're going to talk about that. And we're going to start by, Tosca and I are each going to introduce ourselves and tell you a little bit about our stories, and then go into a little bit about food addiction in general, and then in particular, how we provide treatment for food addiction. Okay, so Tosca, I'm going to pass it over to you.
All right. Hey, everybody. I'm so glad to see you here. I've been working with Shift for, I want to say like 3 years now, close to, and I've been in recovery for 5 years from food addiction, and I cannot tell you how much my life has just been flipped around by getting into recovery. I'm so grateful. I get really passionate about it, and I'm so excited that you guys are here. Um, just because, like, all the pain and suffering that we go through as addicts, when we get into recovery, it's just like, oh my gosh, I just want to give this to everybody. And so I'm really glad to share my story with you. Here you can see my pictures here. I am 6 feet tall. I'm really tall. I don't know if you can tell in my picture, but my highest weight was 270 something, and I've lost 110 pounds, and that is the least important thing in my recovery. It is just absolutely the least important. I've really come to find out that food addiction is so little about the food, and so much about like the spiritual and emotional and just the way I show up in the world. So for me, as a young child, I kind of think I was born with food addiction. I don't know if it developed so early, but I can always remember being super focused on particularly sugar products. And I became aware that I was different than others at a pretty young age, because I would see them, they'd have I'd be at my friend's house and they'd have some bowl of something sitting around, and I'd be like, why is not everybody not over here eating this? Because this is the job. There's candy here and we got to eat it all. I mean, that's just the way it was. So, um, I I never was heavy as a youngster, but you can see I got heavy up in my 30s and 40s. But I wasn't heavy, but I started calling myself a sugaraholic when I was in college. I even paralleled it to alcoholism. I was like, they ought to have a 12-step program for sugaraholics, and I didn't even know that they did have that. But you know, it's interesting because I can see the sugar patterns, but also now that I know more about addiction, it doesn't matter the substance, food, drugs, alcohol, work, sex, whatever, we all have so many other things in common. Like, so for me, I was really depressed. I had a lot of self-shaming, self-hatred, inner critic stuff just constantly rolling through my head, which is interesting because on the surface, my life was great. I was a top athlete, I was a top student, I was just going out doing my thing, conquering the world. And, I was the teacher of the year, I'm winning awards, but underneath all of that, I was really, really self-critical and never satisfied and very depressed, and got to the point where I was actually suicidal in my late 20s for a bit. I did pull through that, but what it comes down to is like codependency, rescuing, and these things. If you're a food addict, if you're an addict at all, these things may sound familiar to you. Like, I cannot help, I get a teaching profession. I work my tail off at it because I want to save everybody. And these are the things that make me feel like okay inside. And they're so unhealthy and neglectful of myself, and inability to have boundaries or to say no to anyone, people pleasing, which is essentially just lying. So the ways I was showing up in the world, my life was literally unbearable. And the food that I started, I think I really did have a thing for sugar, like an allergy for sugar. And I could not stop eating when I hit my 30s and 40s. I could not stop. And I'm so grateful that I heard of food addiction through a book called Bright Line Eating. I'm so grateful that I remembered that she talked about 12-step stuff in there, and that I found a 12-step program for food addiction. And I'm just like, it's been 5 years. I put the food down. It doesn't call to me. And it was like not a thing anymore. And now I still have to deal with my life and learning how to show up honestly in relationships and not be codependent. And there's a lot. Recovery takes a long time. But the food part, I put that down 5 years ago, and I'm so grateful that it's just not an option for me anymore, and learning how to feel my feelings. So I'm really glad to have come, full circle, and ended up getting certified as a food addiction coach through the Infact school, and then getting hooked up here with Shift. And I have gotten to watch Amanda and the other therapists do amazing work. And I've gotten to play client myself at these intensives, at a couple of them. Oh, I'm so grateful, because the inner work is where it's at. And I have just seen miracles happen in these intensives, and I'm incredibly grateful for the expertise and just the long tradition that Shift has had passed down for, over 30 years. And here we are, and I'm just grateful to be here and sharing the bit of recovery that I have, and looking forward to more and more. So that's my story, and I'll pass it over to you, Amanda.
Thanks, Tosca. Tosca, can you just touch on, though, a little bit of your journey, like where you got to where, the 12 steps and bright line eating, and, that little bit of your story that you talk about there?
Yeah, so okay. So a friend gave me the book, Bright Line Eating. I read that. I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense. But I am not that crazy. I don't need to weigh and measure my food. I'll just, I'll quit the flour and sugar. That makes sense. So I did that. I had some good success. And I watched myself slide into a popcorn addiction, which I was not interested at all in popcorn before, when I was in the flour and sugar. That's how I discovered I'm not just a sugar addict, I'm a food addict. I got massively addicted to just having a giant bowl of popcorn every night. And, I was like, what is happening here? Anyways, then I had a bout with ovarian cancer, which I got back into the food during chemo. I'm okay. It's been quite a few years, and in the clear, but I could not stop. I could not get myself back clean again, back onto bright line eating. And so I'm a teacher. I would like have my bright line eating breakfast, pack my bright line eating lunch, and I would take it to school. But when the bell would ring at the end of school, my car would drive me to the donut shop. Like I could not go there. I tried to pass it and I'd end up circling back. It was craziness. I was eating increasing amounts of, donut holes to the point like I could watch myself developing a tolerance for a drug that should be knocking me on my butt, and I would just eat so much stuff. And that was every day. And I was watching my weight just, I'm a math teacher. My weight was going up 10 pounds a month. There was nothing stopping. I was like, when is this going to stop? I'm 270. I really need help. And that's when I remembered that Susan had talked about 12-step programs in her book. And I was in the same area as her. So I was like, they got to be around here somewhere. And lo and behold, they were. I was desperate enough to go in to surrender to a food plan that had weighed and measured food. And for the first time, I was willing to weigh and measure my food. And wow, I thought that would be a prison sentence. It was not. It's total freedom. I'm so grateful for that experience and that I was desperate enough to try it. So that's how I really came into recovery and surrendered my food. And it's just been, I've worked the 12 steps numerous times in numerous 12-step programs now, and it just keeps getting better and better. So did I catch everything you wanted me to catch, Amanda?
That was perfect. I
Okay.
just wanted you to share it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tosca.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. So let me just move my screen around a bit. Okay. So yeah, these are pictures of me. And I always never know which part of my story I'm going to end up sharing. But, for me, a lot of people will say, oh, they think they were addicted to food, when they were born. I don't know if I was or not. I certainly liked food. I was a pudgy little girl, but I wasn't that large. But I liked food. I remember food being interesting. I grew up in a very, very healthy food home, so it wasn't the standard diets that a lot of people have when we start working with them. My parents were both hippies, and we ate really healthy food. But I still really enjoyed food. And then when I was in my teenage years and in my 20s, food wasn't that important to me anymore. I started other dysfunctional things were starting to play in my life, and I was drinking, and there were boys, and I got a little bit distracted for many years. And then in my early 20s, a few things changed in my life, and I decided that I wasn't going to drink very much. I say very much because that's a whole other story, but that was my version of it. And when I did that, my food went off the rails. I didn't know my food went off the rails. But if I look at my trajectory now, I can see that's exactly what happened. And for me, from the time I was 20 until I was 42, I think my highest weight was somewhere in the 300s. I don't know exactly what it was. I want to be really clear, Chuck and I keep talking about weight. There's many, many people that are food addicts that do not have any weight issues or they're underweight. Just so happens that there's two of us here that do. So, I was over 300 pounds for a good chunk of my life. And so kind of in those 20 plus years, I really packed on the weight. And I worked really hard to deal with what I thought my problem was, which was weight. I just needed to do anything I possibly could so I could lose weight, because I knew that if I lost the weight, my life would be great. I was convinced that was what was going to happen. And so I was on many, many diets, many of what we call them the pay and weigh diets, like Weight Watchers and Jenny Craig and Bernstein. I really, really worked hard. I went to lots of different exercise, and I had personal trainers. I went to a couple of fat camps. I really worked hard at dealing with my problem, which was the weight. And over the years, I started getting diabetes and high cholesterol. And, my doctors would just say, yeah, Amanda, you're pre-diabetic. And I'd be like, okay, okay, okay. But then I could never follow through on any of it. And I wasn't, a lot of people that we see are very, very good dieters. That is not me. I'm not a very good dieter. I just kind of kept putting on the weight, kept putting on the weight, kept putting on the weight. I wasn't one that lost big chunks of weight in my life. I could not stick to a diet. And I got pretty desperate and I decided to have weight loss surgery. So I had the lap band put in 06. And I just remember being so relieved that finally I was going to be fixed. And I remember the doctor saying to me, I'm Canadian and I live in Vancouver, and they were barely done out here at the time. They weren't done a lot of places at that time, but and the doctor said to me, oh yeah, when's it be? You're just going to be able to eat half a teacup of food. And I thought, oh, no problem. That's going to be no problem. This is going to be the best time of my life. And so I got the lap band surgery, and of course, the night before I went out with my friends and we celebrated my surgery by eating quite a large amount of food. We went for Thai food. And on that, when you have that surgery, in the first, I don't remember exactly what it is. I think it might be 3 weeks. You're only on liquids. And I lost 25 pounds in those 3 weeks. That's the only weight I ever lost on the lap band. And I mean, I had no money, and my sister co-signed a loan for me so I could pay for the lap band. But after that, I could never follow the food plan. I just couldn't do what they told me to do. And so much so that for the next 4 years, I made myself really quite sick. I threw up 3 or 4 times, or actually more like 4 or 5 times every day, because food was always getting stuck. And, with the lap band, they kind of open up. They make it so that the opening gets smaller and smaller, and they never could do that to me because I couldn't follow the food plan. And then 4 years later, I had to get it taken out in emergency surgery because I had just caused so many problems. And by this time, I don't know what my weight was, but I was bigger than when I had the surgery. And before I was pre-diabetic, now I was diabetic. High cholesterol, high blood pressure, and so I was now giving myself needles every day for diabetes, and I was pretty done after that. I was pretty discouraged and depressed, but I had a good job, and but really my life was getting smaller and smaller. It was like, I spent a good chunk of my life like thinking about food, getting food, eating the food, being on the couch feeling sick from the food, waking up in the morning and saying, I'm never going to do this again, telling myself I was terrible. That was really kind of my cycle. And I felt pretty hopeless, and I really didn't know what was wrong with me. I just thought, what, there's got to be something wrong with me. I can't handle my food. So, I was, I was getting pretty desperate, and I was looking for some places to help me, and I really couldn't. There were not a lot of places, but I found one place that I thought this might be able to do something for me, and it was in Utah, and it was for a month, and it was almost $30,000, I think. And when I tell you I had no money, I mean I had no money. My mom took a second mortgage on her house. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go do this. This is gonna change my life. So I went to this program for a month, and I came home, and very unfortunately to say, absolutely nothing changed except one thing happened there, is that you saw a therapist every day. And on the last day for me, my therapist I'd normally seen was out sick, and there was someone filling in. And she was an addiction specialist, as they all were. But she said to me, why don't you try Overeaters Anonymous, which is the 12-step program? And I was like, oh no, I've done that. I don't like it. I don't like the programs. I don't like the 12 steps. I don't like the God part of it. I'm not one of them. That doesn't work for me. I've done that. That was one of the many things I've done. And so her and I continued seeing each other even after I went home. In those days, it was on Skype. And every time she saw me, she'd say, why don't you try going back to another OA meeting, Amanda? And I was like, no, I don't want to. Finally, one day I did. I remember it well. It was right around Halloween. And I was like, okay, fine. I'll just go to this OA meeting. And, so I went to this 12-step fellowship and I went to a meeting. There's many different food 12-step fellowships. And the good news for me there is I went and I never left. Nothing really changed for me. My life didn't change much. I didn't get abstinent and sober at that point in time. Although I got support. I was around other people that did understand. But not a lot changed for me physically. And then I was a drug and alcohol counselor, and I ended up calling this place in Florida called Acorn, which is what Shift used to be called. And I went there, and I was at that point in time, their intensive was 5 days, no aftercare. And again, I really had no money, but I somehow managed to get myself on a plane and to their 5-day program. And I remember walking in there very hopeless. Like, why was anything ever going to work for me? And for the first time in my life, I got treatment for what was actually wrong with me. And what was wrong with me was that I was a food addict. Yes, I had obesity. Yes, I was an emotional eater. But my primary disease was addiction. So I had to treat my addiction, and then the symptoms of my addiction, my weight, and my emotional wellness healed. But before that, I'd always been getting treatment by well-meaning practitioners for either obesity or emotional stuff, depression, anxiety, and those were only treating the symptoms. So yeah, so I walked into Acorn and finally got treated for food addiction, and nothing in my life has been the same since then. That was 10.5 years ago. And then I volunteered with Acorn for a while, and because I couldn't afford to do anything else with them. And I was still working at the Drug and Alcohol Treatment Center in Vancouver. And then I started working full-time with Acorn. It was interesting, both the Drug and Alcohol Center and Acorn wanted me to work full-time at the same time. And of course, I couldn't do that. I knew that working with drug addicts and alcoholics was actually much easier than food addicts. But I just knew I was called. I was just so called to work with food addicts. That was, what literally had taken my life from me. And so then I worked there full time, and here I am 10.5 years later. And yes, as Tosca said, I've lost, over 130 pounds and kept it off. And I no longer have diabetes. I mean, you have diabetes forever, but I'm on no medication. My cholesterol's down, my diabetes is down, my high blood pressure, all of that is down. And as Tosca said, that's amazing. It really is. I just have freedom to live my life and do things in my body. But the freedom I have really more is that my mind is no longer hijacked by thinking about all those things. What am I going to eat? Is there going to be enough food? How much weight do I have to lose? What do I look like? What do people think of me? Oh, I feel sick. Like, that was just not freedom. There was no, it's gone. I'm not white knuckling. I'm not hungry. So I was free to live. And the food part of it is such the small part of really what this recovery looks like. But we're going to talk about that. So really, for me, what I can tell you is, for 20+ years, I just had the wrong diagnosis. And there was so many well-meaning, whether it was personal trainers, dietitians, nutritionists, my doctor, they all were really working. I saw an eating disorder therapist for 10 years, but we were just treating the wrong disease. That's my story. That's a little bit about me. And so now we're just going to keep talking. That kind of pulls us into, well, what is this disease? What are you guys even really talking about? So this is a graph that Phil Wardell created, who was the founder, one of the co-founders of Acorn. And again, I keep calling it Acorn. Acorn is now Shift Recovery. Um, and so Phil created this. And it's a great way to look at the different types of eaters. And this is oversimplified, but it really makes a lot of sense. So we've got people in three categories: normal eater, emotional eater, and food addict. So normal eater. I don't like the word normal. What does that even mean? But it's the best word we can come up with. So these are folks that the problem that they have is physical. They're either underweight or overweight. So their weight is their issue. And what that means, if their problem is physical, that the solution has to be physical. So what these folks need is what many of us, and I'm sure if you're here, you've been down this road, excuse me, is kind of the calories in, the calories out. Calories in, calories out, right? So it's all these diets like Weight Watchers, Jenny Craig. Actually, Weight Watchers is probably the best program there is for people that are in this category. It works really well, right? You reduce your calories coming in, you send out more calories coming out. What's that red line there? Can you guys?
I'll try to get it.
Okay. And so this is diet and exercise, right? So you want a diet, exercise, and you probably need some support for that, you know? And what works there is willpower. You need willpower for that. Less calories in, more calories out. Okay, there's a plethora of treatment in the world for this category, and there's great there for that. So then the next category is emotional eating disorder. Also a plethora of treatment out there for eating disorder. So the problem for eating disorder is both physical and mental emotional. So this is often where you'll get binge eating, restricting, anorexia, purging. And also, I just want to say, binging, purging, and anorexia can also be addiction, but that's a bit more complicated. But what's going on here is that people are eating over unresolved trauma. And when we say trauma, it can be little t trauma, big T trauma. You know, it's hard to be in this world without some sort of trauma in our lives. And they may have weight issues. They may be overweight, they may be underweight, or they may be, you know, a healthy weight. But they really, what these folks need, their solution needs to be mental, emotional. So they need skills to cope with feelings. We really need to learn how to be in this world with feelings, because you can't be in this world without having some sort of feelings unless you're numbing down, pushing down those feelings. So we want support to resolve past emotional struggles, irrational thinking. So really you want to heal the trauma. So this is where you go to therapists and counselors. You might have group therapy, and you also might need the same tools as the normal eater would. You might need a calories in, calories out, you know, a healthy diet. Okay. And what works for this group of people is moderate eating. This is the group of people that what we're going for is eating everything in moderation. Intuitive eating, moderate eating. This is what this group is looking for, and some great therapy, right? And I am not making any of these categories small. They can be really tough. Eating disorders, emotional eating is brutal. And then the next category is addiction. Okay. So addiction is when there's physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean? We're actually going to look in a minute about what those different parts mean, but there's a physical part of this disease and a mental, emotional, and spiritual part of this disease. And the physical comes on as a craving, and we're going to talk about it in a minute. And the mental obsession is our false thinking around it. And often, as well, of course, as the emotional eater, there's trauma in there for sure. Food has definitely been a way that we've used to cope with life. It's just that now it's turned into an addiction. And what it means is when there's an addiction, our brain has changed. Our brain is now wired different when there's an addiction. And in order for us to feel normal, we need to have our addictive substances. It's all about our receptors and our dopamine receptors. And we actually need to have those substances to feel normal, to feel better. And the more we've been using, the longer amount of time and the larger amount of quantities, the more and more we need to feel normal. So therefore, the solution here is mental, emotional, and physical. So it's all of them, and spiritual. You need to treat the entire person, okay? So we need to abstain from any of our addictive substances and eating behaviors. And as well as all this stuff that needs to go on in mental, emotional. And when we talk about spiritual, what we're talking about is like our spirit, our soul, who we are is broken. And when I don't even like to use the word broken because we don't need fixing, but it's like when we talk about depression and anxiety and self-hatred, and we just aren't connected to our highest selves. And whatever that is for you, highest selves, the universe, the earth, God, we're just not connected right here to ourselves. And that's why our spirit is broken. And we need to heal that. And it's been broken because our brain literally has been taken over by some sort of addictive substances. And that can look so different. You know, a lot of people, I think, struggle with the word addiction because you might not look like the picture of addiction. You know, you're not face down in the bar at night, or you have a home or a good job or a family. So that can get tricky. And there's definitely different levels of addiction. And what works? What works? Well, surrender. We're going to talk about that. So again, I just want to be clear that there's lots and lots of treatment out there for a normal eater and emotional eater. And many of us have been doing that for years and years and years and years. And, you know, why isn't it working? Well, simply because it doesn't work if we've got food addiction. It's like prescribing somebody hearing aids when what they need is glasses. When they can't see very well and you go to a doctor and they give you hearing aids because you can't see very well, it's not going to work. And that's exactly the same thing as here. And unfortunately, though, because the weight loss industry is such a huge industry, is so many people get down that journey for years and years and years and years and years. They spent so much money and so much time. They feel hopeless and discouraged because there's so much competition, if you will, because of the weight loss industry. So the interesting thing is that the number of overweight and obese people is growing every year, despite the enormous efforts and treatment options for obesity and emotional eating that are out there. So we know something's off. We know something's off. And it's not just that you're weak and that you can't do it. That's just not our reality. Okay, so what I was talking about, this is what we call the roundabout, and it's a man named Dr. Gutorm created this, and we've changed it a little bit, but this is a great picture of what happens in addiction. And so there's two components of addiction, okay? There's the physical and the mental. So the physical part is the food, okay? So we have this desire to pick up food, right? We might say, okay, we're on a diet. We might be on bright line eating. I'm going to follow my bright lines. I'm vegan. I'm no, whatever it may be. I'm not going to do this today. And we go along through life. And then actually, we're going to start down here. So we tell ourselves right here, what we call the national anthem, I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to keep on this diet. I'm going to follow my bright lines. I'm going to go to the gym, whatever it may be. We're convinced this is what's going to happen. And then we go along and life happens. And we can be of big things in life or little things in life. So something happens, we get irritable, we're unhappy, or even we get excited, you know, and life starts filling up for us. Okay, we have fear, guilt, shame, excitement, joy. We might not even know we have it, because many of us, when we first start working with them, they're like, feelings. What are feelings? I'm good. I don't have any feelings. But what happens, unbeknownst to us, is our emotional barometer fills up. Okay, and there's a while where willpower really works. Willpower really works. until we hit a certain point. And when we hit the point, which we call the boiling point in addiction, we get a mental obsession. And this mental obsession doesn't mean all I can think about is a cookie or cake or ice cream or a glass of wine. What it means is that we have a thought that completely takes away what we said down here when we said, oh no, I'm done. This is it, Amanda. You're not going to eat today. You're going on this diet. You're following your bright lines. We forget all of this. None of our consequences come to our mind. And what happens is we call it an alarm will turn off, and it'll be like, oh, it's Friday. I've worked really hard. I deserve this. It's the weekend. No big deal. I'll get back on Monday. You know, I just am going through a divorce. It's really, really hard. I need to eat. Something like that. That probably makes no sense given everything we've been through. And when we're there, we have no choice. And I mean this, you have no choice, because at this point, our brain, if we're addicted, has already let out a little bit of dopamine, telling us we want more, we want more. And there's just tons of scientific evidence, you know, that you can look at with that. So it's already telling you, give me some more, give me some more. Your defenses are weak, both emotionally and physically, and you pick up again. So now you're over on the physical side. And this is when we have the physical craving of it, okay? Meaning that if we're addicted, we want more and more and more. And it takes us longer and longer to stop, okay? So two things can happen when we have this, is that we have the abnormal reaction, which I'm not really going to go into other than that's what I just talked about. For those people that are addicted, we now have a physical craving. So if sugar is what we're addicted to, and we have sugar in any form, and we're addicted, there's a very high chance we're going to go into a physical craving that will lead to a binge. And the physical craving just means I can't stop once I start, and I want more and more and more, okay? Here's where it can get tricky, is sometimes you can go, oh, I'm just going to have one cookie, and you manage to only have one cookie. That's what we call a click day. You had a normal reaction, and you think, oh, look, I'm good. I just had one cookie. This is a problem. And then sure enough, we go through, whether you had a binge or you had a normal, one day you say, I'm done, and the whole thing happens again. But if you're addicted, the thing is, A, you'll never stop being able to hit this mental obsession part unless you get treatment. And you never know if you're going to have a normal reaction or an abnormal reaction. You don't know when you're ever going to be able to stop. Okay? So that's physical and mental. And the truth of it is, the physical part of this is so small, because once you put down, so far, even I know we've got GLP-1 drugs out there, we've got weight loss surgery, but there's nothing that takes this physical craving away without major side effects and for long-term yet. The only thing we know of for that is complete abstinence, okay? So what we know is we have to stop this completely, and then all our treatment has to be over here. So if there's anyone here from Bright Line Eating, and you just put the food down but didn't use all the other tools, that could be the problem. Same thing if people go to 12-step groups, or if you've ever just been on a diet, well, that's not going to work because you're not dealing with the mental and emotional. Or if you've gone to therapy for years, but you're continuing to eat your addictive foods, that's not going to work because you're going to be in constant craving and you're never going to be able to stop. Okay? So all we have right now for the physical is complete abstinence from our addictive substances, and we've got to work over here. And that's why we need treatment. Okay? Which is what we do at Shift. So that's kind of the basics that we're going to talk about. And we just touched the surface on addiction. And now we're going to go into what it is that we do Shift. Okay? And then any questions that you have, we will definitely open it up. So the program is now an 11-week program. As I told you, it was a 5-day program when I went through. And so it's an 8-day intensive program. And it's been going for over 30 years. And we've literally watched thousands of people come up from the depths of food addiction in all different body shapes, sizes, and lifestyles. And we do an in-person intensive and we do a virtual intensive. And they're very, very similar. So the next intensive is in May. That's virtual, May 16th through 23rd. And then the next in person is in July, and that's in Florida. And a couple things with the virtual that are a little bit different. First of all, we never used to do the virtuals. When that idea, that came in COVID. So we were 3 weeks out. We had our next intensive, and it was in April of 2020. And we'd had an intensive in February, and we had one in April, and we had to cancel it because of COVID. And I still don't remember where the idea came from, if it was myself or one of the other members on the team. What I know is that I didn't like the idea, and I thought it was going to be terrible. I'm like, there's no way we can do this virtually. It's just not going to work. Thank goodness I was wrong. We ran the virtual all through COVID, and we're still doing them because they've been so amazing. So to date, again, the first virtual was 5 years ago only, but we have no different, the same statistics are for people in long-term recovery. They are different. And what we do in them is the same though. So, but with the virtual, you start working with a coach a little bit ahead of the intensive, and they go over your food with you and your food plan, and you get your groceries ready for the week. And then you're on the intensive. And what we say to people is that when you're on a virtual intensive, we need people to act just like they're in person, which means your whole life will be about being in treatment for that week. You're not going to social events, you're not working, you're not raising your kids, you're really like in an intensive, and it is an intense. They're pretty long days. We do have different time zones, so it's Eastern time folks, of course, will start later in the day and go later in the night, and Pacific time folks will start earlier and whatnot, but they're both very similar. And then both of them have 10 weeks of aftercare, and the aftercare, gosh, it's a brilliant program. I'm very proud of this program. We've created this in the last couple of years, and it's really something. And it's virtual, and they're identical whether you're in person or virtual. So the aftercare looks like once a week for 10 weeks. You have a one-on-one session with a counselor. You have a once a week for 10 weeks. You have a 3-hour group on Zoom with your same group of you that were in the intensive. And you do evening review every night that you email off to the counselor, and you'll get a response every day. So it's over 100 hours of treatment that you get in this 11-week intensive. And the main focus of the 8-day part of it is abstinence, detox, and then your basic recovery skills. So people get abstinent, they get abstinent, they put down their addictive substances. And it can vary for people, but the most common foods that are addictive is sugar in all forms, including artificial and other natural sweeteners, flour, and then not as common, but common can be grains and some fats. And then the other major thing for people is volume addiction. And so it's a weighed and measured food plan. And I'll just add this in here. There definitely is different stages of food addiction, early stage all the way to late stage. And early stage, what we often see is it is often only sugar at that point for people. By the time people are coming to us, although this seems to be changing a bit more, unfortunately, they're a little bit further down the road, which is unfortunate, because if we catch addiction earlier, then we don't actually have to do as much. We don't actually have to do as much of a rigorous program in our foods if we catch it earlier. And my hope is that more and more will start catching it earlier. But by the time you're mid to late stage, most people have volume addiction. And so it's a weighed and measured food plan. And even some people will say, well, there's no way. I mean, I don't overeat on vegetables or carrots. But I tell you, if you're putting down your addictive substances, if you're not having cakes and pastries and chips and all those things, and the only things you are able to binge on, we see people binging on them all the time. So no flour, no sugar, weighed and measured food plan. 4 meals a day, that's the food plan that we have at Shift. And there is several food plans that work, and a lot of people want to debate the food plans, and we just try really hard not to get into that because it's such a small part of it. As long as you are free from your addictive substances and eating behaviors, you're going to be okay. Unless there's major medical issues, then of course we'll talk to you and individualize your food plan. Okay, so abstinence. So absolutely on the 8 days, people get abstinent. And often people do go through some detox. It's detox can be pretty brutal for people. We're also a caffeine-free program, and there's not a ton of programs, although more and more are going that way because there's so much scientific evidence that caffeine really elicits cravings in people. So it's a caffeine-free program. So people can have a very huge detox from caffeine, but also from sugar and flour. Not everybody at all, but so we want to be with people when they're in those crunch days of detox. And then we want to start people on a foundation of basic recovery skills. And the emotional work, in a perfect world, people wouldn't be doing deep emotional work in their early days of recovery, but it's almost impossible because you're putting down the substance that you've used to cope with life, and life is still happening. Feelings are coming up, things are coming up for you. So we really want to create as strong a foundation as we possibly can for people. And so we start the emotional, mental, spiritual healing right away with people. And then that's what you're working on for the whole 10 weeks. And then a couple other things I'll just share about Shift and what we have is that it's quite an amazing community of people. And so we have some of you may have already been on them, and Toss is going to put links to all of these things so you can get more information on them. But we have Shift Strong calls 4 times a week, and they're free, and anyone can join them. They're 1 hour. We all take turns leading them. Sometimes I might be there, you'll see Tosca there, or different people are there, and it's just a check-in. How you doing? What's going on? And if you're brand new, we really encourage people, just go to those meetings, see if it's a fit for you. Talk to people, tell people your story, and see if it's a fit. They're very, very friendly, and there's anywhere from 10 to 40 people on those meetings, and they're free, and they're 4 times a week. There's one tonight. It's actually already happened. No, I'm getting mixed. Yeah, yes, that's happened. So there's Sunday night, Saturday morning, Sunday night, Monday morning, and Wednesday evenings. We also do hold 2 12-step food meetings a month. One's a speaker meeting and one is on relapse prevention, and they're also free. They're phenomenal. And then we have a lot of alumni programs. So a lot of people will do the intensive, and because the reality is, like, when we're new in recovery, unfortunately, it's not a one and done. We want that, people want that, but this is a lifelong thing. And what I can tell you is that we never hear anyone say, "Oh, I wish I hadn't done recovery. I wish I hadn't done that," because it's just amazing the life you get. So we have other programs on that really build your emotional sobriety that many, many people do. We have one on healing codependency. We have one on relapse prevention. We have one on irrational thinking, and we have one on internal family systems, which is one of our therapeutic modalities that we use with people. So that's kind of our basics, what we do here. And so I think Tosca has dropped some links in the chat. And what I'll say to you all before we go to questions is one of the links you've got is for a free consultation. And I highly recommend you do that. Even if you're not thinking of Shift, but if you have questions about any of this, our counselors and coaches do these consultations. Some of the stuff we've just talked about will be on there, but it can be a lot more personal. And you can just ask any questions, and they're free. And there's a link on there where you can register for them. And they happen several times. If you go in there now while we're still on the call and you have a tough work schedule or a tough schedule and you don't find a time in there that you want, let me know in here in the chat, and you and I could schedule something. But they're fantastic, and there's just no pressure, and they're just giving you more information. There's also a link in there to register for an intensive, and there's also a link in there to join the Shift Strong calls. So I'm going to stop share. Tosca, did I miss anything that you want to say before we open up to questions or comments or anything?
No, I think you did great. And I just was going to add one more link for people. If you have not taken the Yale Food Addiction Scale, and found out, if you don't know if you're like just a, a mild food addict or severe food addict, I mean, we really need, it's good information, because when we come out as a severe food addict, that sort of helps cement it in our heads of like, wow, I do need to pursue like treatment that's, not just, let me try the minimum amount of treatment. Like, this disease gets quite severe. And so take that Yale food addiction scale. It's about a 5 to 10 minute. It's a validated tool that the scientists use to, do all kinds of research. So I would recommend you doing that. And there's like the 30-minute consultation is just you one-on-one with a food addiction coach. And it, no matter where you're coming from, this can be really insightful for you. So it's a service that we offer. And again, like Amanda said, the Shift Strong support calls are just beautiful. Our community is just sweeter than ever. I love it when I lead those things. It's just nice to see everybody supporting each other. So yeah.
I'll just say too, as Tosca said, this disease can get quite brutal, and really take heed for any of you that are thinking, oh, I'm not there yet, I'm just an early stage addict. What we can guarantee you is that it will only get worse. We can guarantee you it will only get worse if you're an addict, unless you do something. So don't wait. And so many people will come to us and be like, oh my God, I found out about this years ago, but I didn't want to, and now it's so much worse. And don't wait. And I'll also say there is, if people have questions about other things that are out there, there certainly is. And you all are here, so I suspect you've done some of them, but there definitely is. We're not the only fish in the sea. You can go to 12-step programs on your own and see if they work for you, and they're free. There is more and more people offering group therapy around food addiction. The one thing I really want to say to people is that you need to be careful about, and this is unfortunate. The great news is food addiction is becoming more and more of a word. People, the medical industry is taking it on. However, what we're seeing is that people are saying they're treating food addiction, but they're not actually. They're treating eating disorders. And so we just want to be careful. You just want to ask people what their model is. Are they going for everything in moderation? Is that their goal? And if it is, and you're just an emotion leader, not an addict, perfect. But if you're an addict, it's not going to go well for you. So you just want to be careful. You just want to, vet people, and we can certainly, if you don't feel you're quite ready for treatment like ours, we can help you out. Frontline eating is another one. Some of you might have came from there. We're Susan and us, we very much have the same beliefs, and what we know with bright light eating is a lot of people that are doing bright light eating, the ones that are struggling, they just need more support. And so we're kind of that next level of support. It's just not quite enough doing it. And then, we're that next level of support. Oh,
Yeah.
I'll be quiet.
Well, on that note, I just wanted to add, like, there are a lot of things out there, and I don't want people to ever get confused with like just because we have a virtual intensive. This is not like an online school for learning about food addiction. This is treatment. Like, it's like you're in deep emotional work for 8 hours a day with 2 or 3 food addiction therapists. I mean, it's not knowledge of food addiction, and we're not teaching you about food addiction. It's actual treatment, and it's very intense, which is why it's called an intensive. So there really aren't many programs out there doing this level of intense work. In fact, I don't know if anyone does this to this level online. So just throwing that out there. This is not what you've tried before, and it hasn't worked for you. So are we opening up for questions now, Amanda? Yes, if anyone would like to raise their virtual hand or unmute.
You can also put a question in the chat if you prefer. Casey.
Oh, yes, Casey.
Hi. So I did have a one-on-one consultation with Gina, and she was really wonderful. And the things you say are hopeful. I have really one simple question and one more complex one. one is how big are the cohorts for the in-person? That was the easy question.
Just go ahead and ask them both and I'll try and answer them both.
Okay. I have been in the rooms for 38 years. I've had amazing things as a result. I've done BLE, and over the last couple of years, in BLE, I got down to my maintenance weight for the first time ever, and I stayed there for a number of years. I had my longest term of abstinence, which was 6.5 months. And yet, since then, that was 2018, I've never given up binging. And obviously, I don't do it as much because I'm 70 pounds less than I used to be. But it is what it does to your soul. I have last 2 years worked. There is a question at the end of this. Really hard in a deep step dive, certainly on the spiritual side. I've had decades of therapy. Currently, I've got 7 days of abstinence, and I am miserable. Well, understandably, because I don't. That which I have always used as my backup for coping, and I have an incredibly good life. I have safety and financial security and a husband. Okay, so you understand. And I am not capable of stepping into it. And I just would like to hear something that would make me believe, well, who knows what would make me believe, but that something could happen during the intensive that would shift my experience. So I'll pass.
Oh, Casey, thank you for both of those questions. And yeah, boy, I hear you, and I relate. And what you're asking is something we get asked all the time. So the first question, so are the group sizes, we don't go bigger than 13. They're quite small. So it could be anywhere from 8 to 13. I don't know what it's going to be. So that's for both. That's in person and virtual. It's the same for both of them. Okay. In person and virtual. Okay. So I really hear, I mean, you've done a lot, bright line eating, been in the rooms, I'm assuming you're meaning the 12-step rooms. You've done deep step dive. And when you just said, what it does to your soul, gosh, my heart, I just feel it. And you have 7 days of abstinence. Congratulations. This is not a small deal. And then I heard you say, oh, don't get me wrong, I have a great life. Interesting. That's always a place where people say things like that. And I'm like, really? And so I'll back up a little bit. And I hear what you're saying. You have a husband that loves you and you're financially secure and a roof over your head. And that's what I'll tell you. Unfortunately, Casey, that can be the thing that makes it trickier for us. Because it's like, what's wrong with me? I'm not living in a ditch, poor, begging on the street. I have all these amazing things in my life, and here I am, and so, and Casey, what you just described is we see so much of that. And so, yeah, I don't know what's going to be different for you. And this is what I can tell you. And again, if I had more time with you, I'll tell you that the majority of the time when I talk to people about these things and we listen and hear the things that they've done, it's about what has been done all at the same time. So you say, so I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions. Are you okay with that? Are you okay with sharing that? Okay, we'll just go briefly here. But I always find any question that one person asks helps everybody. So this is a great question. So
I hope.
Yeah. You are not alone, Casey. Unfortunately, you're not unique in exactly what you're sharing. And that's just the reality of it. And so what I did hear you say is that you've actually done treatment before. And please interrupt me anytime that I'm wrong here. And Tosca was kind of briefly touching on this. So you've done, and what treatment is treating the whole system all at once. The physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual, all at the same time with a pretty intense level of support. And so, what would be interesting with you is like, if you looked at your story, like what were the things that, how long were you abstinent? And then when did you pick up? And so like, what's the longest time you've ever been rigorously abstinent, Casey?
6.5 months on BLE.
Okay. Six and a
It's
half
the first time
months.
I ever got down to the goal weight, and the new clothes and everything were great, but it was unfortunate to find out that it didn't change my internal experience.
It isn't. So that was something in my story that, my whole life, my problem was my weight. And I thought once I was, a healthy weight, my whole life would be fixed. And that's the rude awakening. Yeah, that's not the case. That's why we need so much support, right? So 6.5 months, you're rigorously abstinent. And during that time, so you were sugar-free, you were following the BLE plan, food plan,
Yeah.
rigorous to a T. Okay. During that time, what else were you doing? What were you doing on the mental, emotional, spiritual side?
I did IFS with I can't remember his name, but Susan was
Oh,
and,
yes. Yeah.
and I was probably doing therapy since I've done it most of my life.
Yes.
Let me just tell you that what appeals to me about shift is the intensity. I feel like stuff needs, I've done therapy, some good therapy, but it feels like I need to be held in something that's intense for long enough that I can't squeeze out of it. So
Yeah. Yeah. And Casey, I want to say, it is called the intensive, and it is an intense as people are ready for it to be. It doesn't have, for some people, it's not intense because they're not ready to do that level of work, and that's fine. That's fine. But I think what I just asked you that question, and I'll tell you, in my 10.5 years working with food addicts and longer with all addicts, I have never come across somebody that when I say, when they're like, I have no idea why I'm picking up, and we go over their story and I see what they've done, where I can say, oh my gosh, you've done all of the pieces all at the same time, and here you are. It's just not the reality. And so just from that teeny bit you said is that I would suspect what happened was you were on a diet, you put the food down, so you were on a diet, you lost the weight. And I suspect also when we lose the weight, it can feel pretty good. We get on a little bit of a high, and you didn't have enough support to deal with the rest of the stuff that was going on, including the weight loss. And so that emotional barometer, what it sounds like to me, Casey, was filling up, because one day, here you are, 6.5 months, I lost all my weight, I'm feeling so good. Nothing rational would make us go, oh, I'm not going to eat today. Or sorry, nothing rational would make us say, oh, I'm just going to pick up this today. But it did for you. And so what we know for a fact, no questions asked, is that your emotional barometer filled up. So you didn't have the tools to keep your emotional barometer low enough. And 6 months, honestly, is a drop in the bucket. I mean, it's unbelievable. But we say to people, for your first 2 years, you really need substantial support. Because for most of us, we're learning a new way to live in this world without food, without our substances. And that takes a lot. So that would be my very unofficial guess. And I don't want to judge you at all because you barely shared with me, but that's what I suspect was going on. And then, you said you've been doing therapy most of your life. So was I. But most of that time I was doing my therapy while I was eating my food. So it's about doing the whole picture all at the same time.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate all the people that have listened through this. So
yeah, well, I'm sure, I guarantee you, Casey, it was helpful. I do. You will not be alone. Yeah, you see Yvonne tapping her head, but we always think we're very unique, but unfortunately we're not. So, and that's why I relate to you so much, Casey. So thank you for sharing so vulnerably. Deborah.
Yes. Good evening. Thank you, Tasca and Amanda. I just want to be upfront that I've just been thinking about food all day, and even like after this session is over, what's going to stop me? I try to remember I'm 100% powerless, but that doesn't seem to be the majority of my thinking lately. I've been in OA for 40, what is it? 40, almost 45 years. And then I've been working OA How for the last 27 years. And I've had some good 10-year and 7 years back to back. but I have found at age 72, not to my liking, of course, that I can't do any substitute sugars, any sisters of sugars. I was listening to a podcast this afternoon. So I had heard some of what you said today or tonight. Don't lose my train of thought. But the 4 stages. And I'm definitely the last one. I mean, I just don't get it. I've had such good recovery in the past, and now it seems I can't eat. Well, 5th or beyond is kind of a guideline for OA how, but I just, and I'm off. It seems to be salty things, definitely sugar, flour. But I think about the things that I binge on, and I think, what's wrong with me? I even like weigh and measure, but I eat just enough, like 20 grams of nuts and an ounce of cheese and maybe half an apple, weighed and measured, just enough to wake up the next morning and be miserable and not, it's like I feel like I'm sabotaging myself. And life is life. My mom just passed away March the 5th. So I've got that going on. My husband and I are in marriage counseling, but I've got all this other stuff going on. So a question. I feel like the only thing that's going to help me or have a chance is if I wait until July and do the intensive physical, come down there, take my phone. I'm already anticipating, what can I do so I don't gain 30 pounds before July comes, I guess is one thing. I mean, I did hear the strong calls 4 times of that. And the other thing, at least in my mind, unless you've got some other theory, if I jumped in and did it in May, because how am I going to make it out or make it? I mean, I guess I could white knuckle it, but until then, and at least when I talked to somebody midweek, there was a spot in each course, the virtual and the in person. So I am just.
Deborah.
Yep.
Yeah, I got you. So did you have a consult midweek? Is that what you just said there?
No, I haven't done that. I will do that.
You've talked
tomorrow.
to someone
Or
that
probably Tuesday had more openings. Or I need to talk to a counselor. I have not done
sorry.
it.
When you said you talked to someone and they told you there was a spot in each of the programs, that's why I thought you meant that you talked to somebody that.
Oh, no, that's when I think I called a week ago.
Oh, the office.
The
okay,
office.
got it. I understand. Okay. Oh boy, first of all, thank you. And I really heard you that you're thinking of food all day. I really heard you. And God, I'm always, my heart goes out, and I'm also grateful and sad. I'm grateful to be reminded that that's where I could be. And thank God I'm just not thinking of food all day. And that's what we're going for. Like when you said the white knuckling, I mean, you clearly know if you've had, 7 and 10 years of abstinence, Deborah, we're not going for white knuckling. We're not going for things. This is not a diet. We are not on a diet. That is not a life of freedom. We are going that we don't feel deprived. We don't feel miserable. We love our food plans. Like that's just not what we're going for. And, you said, you can't do no substitutes or anything anymore. And unfortunately, that is the truth. The disease progresses. And so if we pick up or we relapse anytime and we go back again, most of the time, we're going to have to do more than we did the times before. And unfortunately, Deborah, that looks like what's happening to you. And that's why we've just taken out all the substitute sugars in the beginning, because we've seen it take so many people down. And so one of the things I didn't say when I was answering your question, Casey, was, when we when we look at all the different areas of people, like what has gone on with somebody, why was someone picking up, why was someone in relapse? There's all different parts of it. And I mentioned several of them when I was talking to Casey. And one of them is also, let's talk about your food. What is in your food? Have you been eating something that's been a low level addiction for you this whole time, a low level burn? Like often natural sweeteners or artificial sweeteners can be that for people. And when they get pulled out, then they don't have those cravings anymore. Then they're not picking up. Or there might be other specific things for certain people. Like some people can't have nuts. Some people can have nuts, no problem. So we do want to take a look at the foods. And, you know, and I really heard you, you know, what do I do so I don't gain 30 pounds, you know, before July. So, and again, I want to say to you, Deborah, just like with Casey, like your story, even your age, how long you've been in the room, like this is a very common story for us, you know, so a couple things. Yeah. So there is May, there is the virtual in May. That is, what is that now? I don't know. How far out is that one? What even is the date today? 2.5 weeks. So there's 2.5 weeks to that. Casey, you have to go. Okay. Thank you, Casey. We'll send you the recording. And Casey, good luck. If you want another consult, just let us know. Okay. Deborah, so there's the May one, of course. And the other thing, we do have people that are exactly in your shoes, that we have people will sign up and work with coaches and try and get on the food plan, and they get a lot of support. Not everyone can do it, of course, but you absolutely can go that way. You can start working with one of our coaches, and they can work in very many different ways. And in some ways it can be like a glorified sponsor. And so some people want to talk to a coach, you know, for a short period of time every day. It might be half an hour once a week, but it's just, that's not a counselor, not therapy. And we don't want you doing therapy right now. We want you, what it can help people do is get abstinent and go through their detox. So that's a fair chunk of time, but we've definitely had people do that. So there's that, going to your 12-step meetings, getting on the Shift Strong calls, and just get yourself kind of really in the seat in the Shift community, and tell people like what you just said to us, Deborah. Get on a Shift Strong call and say, this is what's happening to me. I'm going to May or going to July, and I don't want to gain 30 pounds. And like, be honest. And people will be there. They'll phone you. They'll be there with you. But you know, Deborah, given what you're saying, you might not want to wait. You might not want to wait until July. I don't know what your situation is, but so those would be my suggestions. Just immerse yourself in the Shift community, the free programs, and if you can, get a coach. You might even start with that. You might even set up a one-on-one with a coach, talk to them, and just see what they think, and then you can talk about the intensives. And even before you do that, get a consult, Deborah, because they're free, and it'll be the same kind of stuff, more just one-on-one talking about you, what exactly works for you. But that's kind of, yeah, you don't want to gain 30 pounds in the next, more so than that. I mean, yes, the weight one thing, but just doing that to ourselves is such a terrible way to live, you know, that in our head, and the obsession and the food. And you know, that's what I don't want you to be in anymore. I don't want you to be like white knuckling, and you know, when you said you're thinking of food all day, oh, I just, that's a terrible place to be. So set up a consult, click the link now, make sure that there's a time that works for you, and get some support, and get on there's a Shift Strong call tomorrow morning. Get on it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Deborah. Thanks for sharing with us. Any other questions, comments? Yvonne?
Hi there. I just wanted to maybe a little bit of a response to Deborah's question. So I actually, after Christmas, I was in a really deep hole with my overeating. And so I decided, I mean, I've been dieting for years. I've had other treatments. I've done hypnosis. I've done all kinds of different things, and just not successful. And I know for me, I need that emotional work. And so I am signed up for the virtual in May, but I thought in February, when I sort of started looking into Shift more, I did the scale, and it showed that I was at the far end. And I mean, I've had issues for many, many years, and I was really good at, sticking for about 3 weeks, and then I'd fall off in the ditch. And so that's kind of a cycle, and it's just progressively gotten worse. And so I actually did think about July, but I really felt I need to get in sooner. In fact, I started with the coach in February, and I have weekly calls with her. And I do submit my food plans. I am following the Acorn food plan with some modifications because I have some health issues, and I'll be talking to somebody about that. But so I would just encourage her if she can. I'm so anxious to get going with the rest of the treatment plan that I can feel. I mean, I've been basically pretty abstinent. I gave up sweeteners, which I had never given up ever. I never thought I could do that, and I've given up caffeine. I do. And is it okay if you have caffeine-free coffee, or do you recommend
Decaf?
nothing?
Decaf?
Decaf,
Yeah,
yeah.
well, when you're in the intensive, it's absolutely nothing. And there is a little bit of caffeine in decaf coffee, so you might
Okay.
want to give yourself a bit of a break on that, starting sooner
Yeah,
rather
well, I
than later,
wasn't
so
sure,
that you
but
can be as aware as possible
Okay.
when you show up for the
Well,
intensive. Yeah.
I'm pretty much off. I mean, for a while there, I wasn't having anything, and I thought, well, maybe I can have decaf coffee, and I only have one, maybe once a day or once every 2 days, so it's not like I'm drinking a lot. However, but I'm at the point where I just feel myself now wanting to cheat, and so I'm anxious to get going with the intensive, so I
Yeah.
can
Oh,
relate to
thanks,
what they
Yvonne.
both,
And
that I can
of
relate to
course.
both of what they said.
Yeah. Yeah. And
For
thank you for
sure.
sharing that for Deborah to hear. And yeah, of course, and even when we say cheat, that's diet mentality, and we'll talk more about
I
that.
know.
But
Yeah,
Yvonne, have you been doing the Shift Strong calls?
I have been usually
Oh,
once
great.
a week. I sometimes have missed. I've got some things going on that I'm trying to clean up so that I have free time when it comes to the intensive. And I'm
Right.
retired. I'm also 72, so I can relate. And yeah, so I can feel very much what the other ladies are feeling. I feel all the same
Course.
things. I also
Yeah.
have a great life, but there's obviously,
Right.
those things that at least don't drag me down too bad. But
Yeah.
sometimes it's too much time on your hands to think about food too.
Yeah.
So
Well,
anyways,
Yvonne, I'm so glad you spoke up, and I will be there in May. I will be one of the facilitators in May, so I will definitely see you there. Thank you.
great.
Thank you for
Yes.
introducing yourself and speaking to what Deborah shared.
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
So Tosca, do you just want to drop in again, just so people, in case they haven't, the consult link, just the consult link's there, and again, free, no pressure, one-on-one, and I really encourage you to sign up for those. And as I say, if you're looking now and there's not a spot that works for you, you can just let us know while we're on here, and we can try and help you with that. So is there any other questions here? So there's the link in the chat box again. So the link there, all the links in there for the consult, the intensive, and the Shift Strong calls. So I think there's about, will the links be sent in the email? Yes, Diana, great question. We will also send them in an email. When you get your email, I think the email will go out tomorrow. You'll get a copy of this video as well as all of these links. Yes. I think there's 3, maybe 4. I think there's 3 spots left in the May virtual, 3 or 4. I'm not 100% sure. And I think I'm not sure for July, but don't let that stop you. I also will say to people, if you're worried about money or you need support about money, really talk to Renee at the office. We really do the best we can to support people. We have payment plans, and we want to support people. So all the things that are in your mind about, oh, I don't want to do a consult, or I don't want to do this, I hear you, and you're here for a reason. And just you've already done an amazing step by being here. You know, and those of you that are on here, it's amazing. You know, there's you know, many more people that signed up for this who aren't here, and that's normal. And so just know, you know, those of you that are here, you've really taken a huge step. Like, so just keep doing it one step at a time. And for those of you that aren't here tonight, same with you. Amazing job showing up. Now you're watching the video if you're hearing me say this, and just keep taking your next steps. You know, we're here. We're here. We really, you know, at Shift, our passion really is just supporting people to be free from their food and body struggles, whatever your individual struggle may be. So I'll just check one more time. Any other questions before we wrap up tonight? I know it's Sunday night and people want to move on with their lives.
Oh, we got
Deborah, there you go again. So Deborah, you're muted and we can't see your picture, but we see your hand.
Oh,
There you
okay.
go.
Yeah, it says you cannot start your video because it's disabled by the host. So, but I guess that doesn't matter.
Okay.
Anyway, I just double checked what the highlights were to start. I could start and ask about a coach, to work with a coach, if I get the right terminology. I have the consultation, which I'm
Yeah.
setting up now for 9 o'clock Tuesday. And then start working, ask about working with a coach, get to 12-step meetings, get on the strong calls. Was there anything else? I think those were I was just.
That's absolutely perfect, Deborah. Great job for writing them down. And when you have your consult, they'll go over all these with you again.
Okay.
Okay, great job. Tosca, anything that you want to say before we wrap up?
I think the only thing I would add is if anyone is interested in hearing more of Amanda's story or other stories, we have people who have been interviewed on podcasts. We have a Shift Media page, which you can find on foodaddiction.com. So our website is just simply foodaddiction.com. And there's a lot more info there if you are interested in pursuing just listening and more. But don't just gather knowledge. If you're in that position, set up a consult and start taking some steps forward with us. So that's all I've got.
Yeah, thank you all. And Tosca just said a really important piece about gathering knowledge. Unfortunately, knowledge is, as you've heard from Tosca and I's story, you know, I was an addiction counselor and I couldn't get my food. So knowledge, we don't see it really working for addiction. It's an important piece, but we have to dig in and do the work. So thank you all so much for being here and spending part of your Sunday evening with us. You are going to get an email with this recording as well as the links, and set up a consult. You can reach out to us, ask us any questions. Renee at the office is amazing. And for any of you that are on here with Yvonne, I will be there in May and July. I will be at both those intensives. So maybe I'll see some of you there. And thank you. And Tosca, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Take care.
Good to see you. Take care, everybody.